welcome you, Simran. Thank you for taking time to join us. And it's a lovely topic which all of us who are interested in cooking and would like to know more about. I'll just introduce myself and what the Caliber Club does first. The Caliber Club believes that we should be the best. We should try to be the best you can be. We always try for that. All of us are, and in their own ways. And what I believe is, unless and until you can handle your stress, you're not able to perform your best. So that is how we went on to teaching EFT and promoting EFT more, because I have been practicing for the past 12 years, and I think it has helped me a lot. And I've been sharing this with as many people as possible. Then I realized that everybody has their way of stress relief. It's not necessarily that what works for you will work for everybody else. And I was so surprised that, because a lot of people came and learned, because they were like, how can you be so calm? How did you learn? What happened? This, that. And then I realized that every person has his or her unique way of relieving stress. And I thought, why not introduce different ways of relieving stress to everybody? They could explore it, and maybe they can try it out for themselves as well. So when I realized that there are people who are into crafting in my years as well, and they love doing it, and EFT takes a second place. I said, okay, that's fine, so long as you are not stressed. Then there's one more lady who loves baking. She forgets everything. She forgets she's tired. And whenever she cooks, she feels wow, out of this world. And she forgets everything around her. So that's like, so that's how learning from each other's game. We do is I record these series, and I put it on YouTube as well for others to also know, what can be done and what can be experimented with to find out your way of relieving stress. For the rest of us who are here, I would like to introduce Simran. Simran is actually needs no introduction. Her profile, if I read it out to you, because there's so much to tell about her, and I'm really very grateful that she's here to share her thoughts on this. Simran is a healthy baking evangelist, social entrepreneur, community leader for 40,000 plus members strong, a wonderful mom bakers community, a globally recognized award-winning healthy baking community, creating a wider social impact. Recognized by Sheryl Sandberg as one of the 8 influential FB community leaders in Asia, a TEDx speaker and a Shiro's champion. She conducts workshops with schools, corporate organizations like Nissan India, Unilever, Indus Early Learning, Purna, covered by Economic Times, Indian Express, Sunday Standard, The Telegraph, Deccan Herald, Times of India, Deccan Chronicle, Vogue India, and so on. Simran is also an advisory board on the advisory board of Let's Educate Children in Need, an NGO. And I'm sure, Simran, that you have so many facets to you and so many things that you love to do, love to learn from as well, how you handle all this. But I think today's session won't be enough, but we would love to ask you a few questions. So we'll start with you telling us how and why did you start baking?
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Pallavi. And I think it's very nice of you to have firstly, I think it's very nice and very thoughtful to have such a platform where you're talking about very important things which I think many didn't talk about. And most people, especially, so not used to talking about things which are uncomfortable, things like, stress, things like admitting that we all everybody experiences stress. I think it's very nice to create a safe space where people can do that. So I think that's very nice work. From the point of view, I started baking. I think that's a very tricky question, because for me it's came in waves, right? So I tried to do it initially in 2010. When I sort of just did it just like that, because I was just trying new things. So I just did it for, I started doing it for my family. My kids were not born at that time. So, but the good part was that I was also teaching. So I was teaching baking in an NGO. And I think that sort of triggered my interest in, baking, because at some point in time, and in many ways, even now, The source of baking, or the my association with baking has been very strongly on two fronts. Okay, one is my children. Okay, I started actual proper baking for my son when he turned a year and a half old. That is when I basically started doing active baking. That's one. The second thing is the root association that I had with baking was always from a community impact point of view, because that is where I had started. I was using my knowledge, whatever limited knowledge I had of baking, because a gentleman who I knew for a long time in Gurgaon, he had his NGO, and I was just doing it as like one of the things that I was doing on the weekend. So I think that is how it started. But over when my son was born, I think that was that was a very big turning point for me, because after he was born, I was working full time. I rejoined work, and I moved out of full time working about a year, when he was a year and a half old. That point in time, very frankly, one of the lowest points in time in my life. Not for any other reason, but because I was doing very well professionally. For me to move out of work was a huge setback, because I felt that I was being forced to leave, because I felt that I was being judged for being a working mother.
Right.
And, I didn't want to be in a position to have to make a choice between my child and my career. Uh, and like I said, 10 years back, organizations were not what they are right now. So it was a difficult choice to make. So I was not really in a very good place. And I did make that choice. But like I think many other moms or women who are working, you're constantly, did I do the right thing? Did I not do the right thing? So to overcome that sense of anxiety, and relieve, basically, really relieve the stress that was getting internally created inside me, I
Right.
felt that I should restart baking, just like that. Once I restarted it, I figured that slowly it was becoming the outlet I needed. Okay,
Yeah.
every time when I would think about, okay, I have made this very difficult choice in my life, and now I'm going to not be able to get back. Now I'm going to be set back by that many years, all of that. It would not, I won't say it'll go, it went away, but it helped me deal better, with a lot of
Correct.
things. So I was able to channelize a lot of what I was feeling in things like, okay, reading more, learning. See, what baking entailed for me was learning a new area. Okay, and that sort of
Correct.
made a big difference, because I was being able to constructively use that energy in a direction which was completely new for me. Okay, so it excited me. It was not something I had done like extensively in the past. So I was reading a lot more, I was understanding a lot more, I was doing a lot more trials, I was making my notes, because I'm just that kind of person. So I was making my notes about, okay, this is working, this is not working. My Basically, I was doing healthy baking, dabbling in healthy baking. So I think
Right.
that is how I transitioned into that phase of baking in a more active manner.
That's so good. I think all of us will
Yeah.
relate to this. This feeling of anxiety and tension that
Yeah.
people go through when they are transitioning from, leaving your work or something for children, especially when children come into our lives. I think that's a very difficult phase for most of us
It
if they
is.
have to choose
It is.
between work and there are other problems as well. So I think
Correct.
you pointed out very correctly that yes, and we are not able to share it with anybody because it is like our responsibility and we
Yeah.
feel responsible enough for children and we want to do
Correct.
it. It's not that we don't want to, we want both, the best of
Correct.
both the lives, two
Correct.
worlds. So I
Absolutely.
think you've answered my second question already. My question was baking a stress reliever for you? And I think you've already answered the question the same breath. So thank as well.
Most welcome.
So, but if you can add
Yeah.
something more, if you would
Yes.
love to, how?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, again, I think it has been the same thing. Like, so it has been a stress reliever, different phases in my life. Like I said, it started as a stress reliever, but it did a lot of things for me. So what I was talking about was, for me, when I moved out of that job and I started doing, like I started spending my time working independently, but being available and being there for my child, I think subconsciously I faced a lot of, I felt that I lost a little bit of my identity. Okay. Um, it's difficult to explain how that feels, but I think I felt that. Okay. Because like I said, like anything else, we tend to associate our identity with, say, who we are, say, who we are married to, who we are parents of, who we are, who, whose daughter we are, plus, with our roles. Okay, so where do we actually work? What do we do there? So all of those things, right? So I felt a little bit of loss of identity, but I think baking, sort of again, and from baking, say, not just so wonderful, but a wonderful mom bakers community. I mean, I don't think I've said this enough number of times. I say this every time, that what I've experienced in terms of being able to find my identity through baking, I don't think I would have found it anywhere else. I don't think I would have found it even in my regular job, or, no matter how well I would have done, no matter how well I would have done at that point in time. So I think it has, so that was, like I said, I think anything that eventually at the end of the whole thing, if it's given you, if it's genuinely made you happy, it's going to take you to, where you are supposed to be. Okay, so I say this, that, I was trained for something else and I was meant for something else. um, I love what I was trained for, so I'm still working. So it's not that I don't work, but I think it also gave me that alternative path, which, like I said, gives you happiness, which reduces, again, from a stress point of view, from being just a stress reliever, it actually reaches a point where you're not turning to it because you're stressed. Okay, you're turning
Right.
to it because you are maybe just for the pure joy of it, right? And also at times when you anticipate stress. So I know that, for example, again, with my daughter, for example, when she got diagnosed, right, I had to completely unlearn a lot of things. So what is healthy, right? So if we're talking about unrefined sugars, just for everybody here who may or may not be a baker, if you're talking about if I'm saying that my healthy baking was, I bake with jaggery. Jaggery will not work even for my child right now with her diagnosis. So I had a lot of my stress started stemming again from the fact that, if I was to bake something for her, and she already likes bake stuff, not that she's eating extensively, but whatever she likes, technically it's supposed to be healthy because I'm a healthy baker, but that's something she cannot eat without insulin. So for her, technically, it's not healthy. Okay, so but the premise of healthy and all of that started changing, not changing, but it started expanding. The definition expanded for me, and that's when I anticipated, now I'm going to get very stressed because I won't know how to use this knowledge. I've learned all this in the last so many years. It's of no use to me. I mean, that was the feeling I was getting, right? But nothing is of no use. Okay, it's just pure and simple, understanding or getting adapted to a new situation. A lot of what I knew from all these years of learning, accumulated a lot of the knowledge, it didn't go waste. But I think that stress had started building up, that I'll not be able to, help her, no matter how much I know about food, no matter how much I know about everything, I will still not be able to help her. So what is the point? I think I had reached again that phase, but when she got immediately after her diagnosis. But I think again the same thing. I started reading, I started finding out, I started talking to people who were doing very different baking from I had done, healthy again, but very very different kind of baking that I had done,
Mm-hmm.
in the past. And I think that again sort of re helped me revisit my my learning, as well as help me understand that sometimes you can anticipate that stress is coming, and you will use this as a as a cushion against that.
Yeah.
You will know that you when you're ready to do that.
Great. That's amazing. I think we are learning forever. We are students forever,
Yes,
and every
absolutely.
learning. So, yeah, and I would like you to share with us more about your community and how you developed it, because the way I'm a part of that and the way you have been handling it is amazing. I think I have even called you up to mentor me on how to, take a community. Can you share a bit about your community? Because I would love all these people from my community also to join yours,
Yeah,
because way of
sure.
life is also important.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think, oh, wonderful, again, wonderful mom bakers community. Again, sorry for being gender. I think I work in diversity so much that it sounds very odd that I've called it mom bakers community. We have a few men in that community
Men.
also, who are dads. Yeah, so they also bake. But by and large, yeah, by and large, I think it's also a sort of ironical thing that it only ends up being moms who bake. Anyhow, so when I started that community, the idea again was that from an, like I said, I was reading, making my notes, all of that. But where do I share it? Who do I share it with? And that
Right.
there was this urgent need to share it with somebody who can use it apart from just me. Okay. I mean, I can talk to 5 people about it, but what if they are not interested in baking? Right.
Right.
So I wanted to be able to put it out there. Now, blogging is one of the ways. So I was blogging, but I just somehow felt that blogging is somewhere where I'm writing out stuff. Okay. It's not always interactive. The
Correct.
community also, for example, like is not immediately, like you won't immediately get a response, but I think somewhere it will allow you to have more conversation than say a blog would.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Facebook was the only place which had, this is I think 2014, so almost 8 years back. So it was the only place which had something called a community. I mean, had these spaces, or
Correct.
which I knew, which had a place like that, which would allow you with to create the community with some features that would be helpful and all of that. So I said, let me see what happens. I started it with just for the pure reason of being able to put that information down somewhere. So and I think, it just sort of took off. Very difficult for me to put the exact point in time when it actually started taking off. But I think it took off primarily because one, it was very different, right? So there were a ton of food communities, there were a ton of baking communities. There was nothing called baking, healthy baking.
Correct.
So I think that was one thing that drew people because of the fact that it was different from what they had seen in the past. The other thing was that I'm a very I don't know how to say this, but I'm very clear. Okay, not a very good thing always, but I'm very clear in what I want to do. Okay, so for me, once I started sharing information, I was very clear. I got a lot of people said that, what, if you make this a healthy food group, okay, tons of people will join, you'll have lots of members. Or if you draw a line somewhere in the middle and let people start sharing something general about baking also, general as in other bakes also. But
Correct.
for me, like I said, it's not number. It was never driven by numbers. I started it just to share information about an area that I felt was important. And I also
Correct.
noticed that, this was an area that a lot of kids tend to gravitate towards. Like they want to eat biscuits, they want to eat breads, they want to eat cakes. Okay, what do? You're going to have children who will move in that direction. Um, at some point in time, if it's not early, then it will be later. The second is our eating habits have changed so much, right? So there is a lot of us who may not have grown up eating, say, bread, will be eating
Correct.
bread maybe at least once a week, if not more, right?
Right.
So our consumption patterns, so if our consumption patterns have changed, our children are eating differently, we might as well make that different healthy. So
Right.
that was the idea, and that's why I was very strict about the fact that I don't want to dilute it. I don't want to change the essence of the community. And like I said, it doesn't matter if there are 5 members or 15 members, or 50, 100, whatever that number is, it will not make any difference. So which is, I think, why a lot of people sort of stayed on. That was one. And
Yeah.
I think the second thing was that we had a lot of I think I'm not saying that, it's just me, but I think a lot of people who are like-minded in several things. Like, for example, for me, it's very, very, very important that online we have to be very careful about how we speak. Okay.
Right.
uh,
That's
speak, I think, speak as in, the voice we use when we're typing,
yes.
because it's so easy, for me to just type 2 sentences here and and just move away, right? But who can understand the tone of the thing that I've written? Nobody. Okay, because I'm
Nobody.
not saying it. I'm just typing it, right? So I'll give you an example. On OMBC itself, there was somebody who was might have been 65, 60, definitely plus 60. Okay, so she joined the community, and she was part of the community. She would have share some of her bakes and everything, healthy bakes. Once she
Mm-hmm.
shared something very nice, and some people praised, a few people praised it, and a few others just wrote F, okay,
Oh.
under that. All right. Now she didn't know what that F means. So she got very offended. She messaged me, on in the inbox and said, "I'm sorry, your community is very rude." And I'm like, here
Oh.
I am so proud. People are so nice and kind to each other. And there's somebody who's saying your community is very rude.
Uh-huh.
I said, what happened? She said, what is this? There are so many people who are writing F, F, F on my post. I said, Array, F is not anything else. F is following. It means they want to know when you update this with the recipe. That's why they're writing F, you know. But then
Yeah.
that stayed with me. That idea, stayed with me that, this, see, we have a mix of people, right? We have now social media is open to everybody, so you have
Every.
different age groups. So
Right.
we have to be able to communicate, and we have to be able to be respectful of each other, we have to be mindful of each other, forget respectful, we have to be mindful of each other, that there are people who are of different generations, of different genders, of different knowledge levels when it comes to
Yes,
baking. So we have to be able to not talk down to anybody. We have to be very careful that we are not, we may have done it, nobody's doing it to make her feel bad, but nobody's
right.
thought before putting that F there.
Exactly.
So that I think was, something that I has helped me. So there have been many incidents like that, different
Mm.
in the past years, that have helped me to sort of keep going back and reiterating some messages on the community about how to appreciate, because again, it's an
Right.
online community. If we can't create a culture that is sustainable, it's the community itself will not get sustained. So I think that was
Correct. Correct.
important.
Amazing. Your anecdote was so relatable and it is so funny as well. Uh, it- that lady who didn't know what F stands for in this community. Maybe
Correct.
she found it.
Correct.
So it's true that you need to form a culture. When you have a
Yeah.
community, you need that culture. You need
Yeah.
to understand. And I
Absolutely.
really believe now very full, and it is completely run by the members itself, and that's the best
Yeah.
part of it. Everybody is
Yeah.
so helpful to each other. Whenever there's a question, there are answers
Yeah.
given by so many people who are knowledgeable. So I really appreciate that, and I wish it grows in leaps and bounds, and I wish that you help others as well to live a healthy lifestyle the way you've been doing so far. And I wish
Thank you.
you the best, and your children as well, who have got you onto this road where I think you have found yourself. And
Yeah.
I think that's the best part, best thing that can happen to a mom. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
thank, thank you so much, Simran. Thank you very much. I don't know how much time we have, but we'll start taking questions, maybe one or two, maybe not more than that. We hardly have 4 to 5 minutes to go because of the glitch that happened today. So
No
if
worries.
anybody has questions for Simran, you can either ask her here, or then you're welcome to join her community, and there you can ask her the question as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I wish I was more active. I think I'm seeing all the posts, but I don't usually get a lot of, I think the bakers are now the community, thankfully, like you rightly said, the members are more active.
Yes,
They're able to run it better than I have been doing it so far. So I can now quietly watch.
yes, yes. So are there any questions right now? There were supposed to be a few more members who had confirmed, but I don't know.
I would like to ask.
Yes,
Hi, Anjali.
Hi, Simran.
Hi.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I just want to. I'm good. I want to ask, what is the substitute for baking powder and baking soda? Because they say there is aluminum content in it. So, is there any substitute?
There is aluminum free baking powder and baking soda. Don't use
Okay.
soda. See, firstly, okay, first, I think baking soda is not needed in anything. To be very honest, I think it is just uh, it's just a myth perpetuated by whoever the traditional bakers are. You don't need, okay, you don't need soda for anything. Okay, you want to make it fluffy. See, firstly, if it's the flour has changed, okay, which we're doing, fundamentally, we have changed the texture of the bake by changing the biggest ingredient that makes it fluffy, which is maida. Okay, so if your flour has changed, if you're making, say, a cake, if your sweetener has changed, you have changed the texture already. Okay, so we do not want to imitate the texture of something which we can't possibly imitate. Okay, so baking soda becomes irrelevant, to be very honest. Okay, it is not needed in cakes also, it is not needed in cookies also. Cookies to mein to kuch baking powder bhi nahi chahiye. But with baking powder with some cakes, okay, the only way workaround is that if you have to use baking powder, because most cakes will need that, you use aluminum free baking powder. Now we get it in India. Earlier used to, like about 10 years back, I used to call for it from other countries. Now we get it in India, on Amazon and all. You will get aluminum free baking powder, which you can use. Again, keep the quantity minimum. Like, things like, for example, I think Akila has also earlier shared in one of her, posts there, that things like wheat flour are very heavy. Okay, so if you sift that flour at least 10 to 12 times, it takes patience, but 10 to 12 times you sift it, it creates a lot of air inside that flour. Okay,
Mm.
so you can basically do away with a large quantity of baking powder. You will not have to add excessive baking powder. You'll add only what is little needed to a certain amount. Okay, with cookies again, once you've changed, remove the core ingredients which are typically in typical cookies like maida, white sugar, you have changed the texture. Okay, so we have to be assured that no matter what we add, we are not going to get the same kind of texture. So we might as well not add it and make it, make it more difficult from a health point of view. So just go ahead, go with something. So even for example, when I'm saying say I'm doing say butter cookies. Okay, so when I used to do butter cookies with say when I've done it before I started doing healthy baking, and after I started doing, the difference I have seen is the technique. Okay, the only difference that you will see in the texture, which will get you a close enough texture as compared to say something which is using a regular whatever all purpose flour, is things like, okay, how are you rubbing the butter into the cookie, or you making the cookie like so high amount of fat will make you give you the same kind of texture. Sorry,
Just
go
a
ahead.
minute. We have less
Go
than a
ahead.
minute, so please complete what you're saying, but we might just go off air any moment. Okay,
No
I'm
worries,
sorry.
no worries, no worries.